I so now understand this world that I have kept at an arm's length, this ability, I don't really know what to call it, but this whole world that I have had access to for decades of my life, everything opened up to me at that point. And I was like, oh, I really know, like, this is really cool. Like, we're not the only ones here.
Yeah.
And it honestly, it felt so affirming to me. And it was, I'm somebody who preaches like, I don't need the external validation. And yet at the same time, it was exactly what I needed for me to just step in, own, and embody that part of me, because it is what makes me me.
Hey, you guys, and welcome back to The Psychic Within. I'm actually really excited because we're going to be doing something a little bit different. In the years past, I've done some interviews with some of my clients, but we are shifting gears and we're going to be interviewing some really amazing CEOs and founders that I've been connecting with recently to really dive into the aspect that everybody has psychic abilities. And I'm excited to introduce my very first guest is a woman that I just met recently, and we have clicked. We've had amazing conversations. I just was on her podcast. And so we're jumping in to have a discussion about how she uses her psychic abilities, because now she's gonna admit she's psychic, as well as her intuition in her own business and how she really started with that. So welcome, Wendy Paige Sterling. How are you?
I'm so great, Carrie. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for our conversation today.
Me too. I'm really excited. But before we jump in, I would love for you to share with the audience a little bit about who you are and what you do and what you're really passionate about.
Yeah, of course. So I am the founder of the Unapologetic Women Movement. And, I call myself an intuitive business coach. I've actually been intuitive my entire adult life. And, as we've talked about, I have also had psychic abilities since I was a very, very little girl. I've always had sort of this innate ability to not only feel and hear things, but to also now starting to see things. That I'm slowly coming to accept as a gift. I started my career in corporate for 20 years, ad sales, built multi-million-dollar regions for some of the biggest fashion brands in the world, and came to quickly realize, I know you've talked about your story before. I had a very similar experience where, I was on paper, I looked great. I had a great job. I made a great income. I had the 2 perfect kids. I had the beautiful house. I had what I thought was the amazing spouse. And lo and behold, one day that all came crashing down around me. And I realized that my now ex-husband was having an affair. And I spent the next year really going deep and trying to understand how this happened. How did I fall asleep at the wheel? How did I not know, right? Although the night before I realized what was going on, it was the intuition came back in for me, and it really was intuitive that night. And I started just a process of me really going deep and going in within and trying to figure out who I was, because I had spent 4 decades of my life being the version of Wendy that everyone else saw me to be. And that was because when I had come home and had an encounter with one of my spirit guides, my mom basically told me that I had an imaginary friend and I needed to stop talking about it because this just wasn't a thing, right? Yeah. I come from immigrants. I am a Holocaust survivor, grandparents on both sides of my family. It was all about being American, fitting in. And that is not who I am. I've always been a disruptor my whole life. And so it was really time for me to start owning who I was and not needing anyone's permission to be able to do that. And so on the exact same day, I not only decided that I wanted to end my marriage and to file for divorce, but unfortunately, my mother was diagnosed with ovarian cancer literally 5 hours later.
Wow.
And so it was one of those moments where you think to yourself, like, seriously, universe, like, how could you do this? Like, the 2 rocks of my life. And ultimately, what I was able to come to terms with was, it was happening for me.
Mm-hmm.
And it was happening so that I could really step into my power and to really step into my purpose here and my soul's purpose here.
Yeah.
And while my first business, my first 7-figure business that I started was all around divorce coaching and helping women to find their voice, what enabled me to, not only be successful in that, but to also have the confidence to know when it was time to pull the plug and to end that business and to start something new was really when my mom passed away, which was just about 3 years ago.
Wow.
And it was her passing and my connection, my deeper psychic connection that I've never said it that way before, Carrie.
and you're using the word psychic so confidently.
Thank you.
Love it. Yeah, it's amazing.
So really owning that psychic ability. And while my private clients knew that that was part of what they got when they worked with me,
Yeah.
I hadn't publicly shared it. And I finally gave myself that permission after my mom passed away. And it's something that I've continued to really not only own confidently, but to also see it as, as I said before, it really is a gift.
Yeah.
And it's something that I'm able to help other people with, not just myself. And I think that so many times we, as you were saying before, like, we get so afraid of what other people are going to say or think or, the judgments that are going to come.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, we get to come to a place and a time where that doesn't matter anymore, right? What's really important is I'm here to serve a purpose. I am not here to make other people happy. I am not here to make other people look good. I am here with a mission. I am here to serve my clients. And that's where the Unapologetic Woman Movement really was birthed from, was from this place of it is time for us to take a stand for all of who we are, every ounce of our being, and to be it, because when we allow ourselves to embody, is what I say, like as we allow ourselves to embody this unapologetic version of ourselves, that's when the world opens up. And that's where the ease and the flow and the abundance and joy comes from. And I have been experiencing that for the last couple of years. And it is just, it's something that keeps expanding. It's like the onion that keeps the layers keep peeling.
I always say that about onion. We call them the onion people.
Yeah. We talked about this the other night, right? That that's exactly what the experience is.
Yeah.
And, it's come to the point where as I am becoming this unapologetic woman, as I am working with an amazing group of women that have trusted me to guide them on that same path, it's amazing what happens in such a short period of time. Like time doesn't even become a thing anymore because it's just, you're in the energy of it. And so, it's just been an incredible journey. And it's something that I feel very privileged that I get to, it's like my job. It's like work. And it's not, it's the best.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love it. And I think what's so powerful, and I see this happen a lot, is that and I think it's a beautiful witness to who we are as humans, is that when we are up against the wall, when the rug is being ripped out from under our feet, that's when our psychic and our intuitive abilities come. Yeah. And I see that a lot. That's when yours started to come back to the surface, is when the world is literally like, you're not doing the right thing. You're not with the right people. You're not in the right business, whatever it is. Here's what you need to be doing. Yeah. I think that's really important. Now, before we dive into all the amazing work that you do with your clients, one of the things that I want to focus on is I would love to hear, one of the things that you said is that when you were little, you had an imaginary friend and your mom was like, absolutely not, we don't. Do you remember any other experiences that you had when you were a child, as like the psychic experiences that you had and how psychic you really were when you were a kid?
I'm getting chills with you even asking that question. And this one in particular stands out the most. And it's funny, like I don't know that I've necessarily gone back to pinpoint other times. I know that there were. Mm-hmm. And this one in particular, I remember I remember sitting, I went to an all-girls private school, and most of the teachers were women. I think our headmaster was a man or he was a man. I know that for sure. And I remember coming home and telling my mom how I had this entire conversation with this man on the bench at recess. Red flags went off. My mother was freaking out. And, she was also trying to understand, like, describe this person, like trying to see, is it one of the male teachers or like one of, somebody. And lo and behold, it wasn't, which is why my mom made me believe that it was like I was crazy.
Yeah.
And it was all in my head. And I was like so certain that it was like, no, there was like someone here and he was talking to me and he was telling me things. And he told me his name. I've never told a single person what his name was. And when I was going through my own, I'm a theta healer. And when I was doing theta healing with my mentor and she was training me, she saw that exact moment in my life in that time where she named him and I had never told anyone. And so I was like, that moment, and this must have been maybe 5 years ago, is when I finally really accepted my psychic ability.
Good.
And so from that moment, I mean, it's so interesting because I know that there were other times because I had a very wild, my mom would have called it a wild imagination.
Yes. Yeah.
And I could see things and I could hear things. And I just attributed it to, you're crazy, right? Or you have a wild imagination, Wendy, right? And what are you going to do with that imagination, right? And for me, I felt like, well, I can't draw. I don't act. Like, it's not my thing. But I never understood that my imagination was this. Yeah. And it was really my ability to tap in and to, have this gift of being available to spirit and to be that conduit for not just myself, but for others.
Yeah. And a lot of times our imagination or the voices that we hear in our heads are not just our imagination. Yeah. It's not just a voice that we hear in our head. It's our guides. It's the energy speaking to us. It's us being able to see beyond the veil. It's us being able to see beyond the physical, but we pass it off or we're told not to do it.
Right.
And that can really affect people. And some people struggle to reopen their psychic abilities. So when you had that confirmation that like, okay, this woman is now confirming the fact that I was talking to a spirit guide, that it was, what was your action? Did you freeze? Were you excited about it? Did you fully embrace the psychic abilities or how did that unfold?
I cried.
Yeah.
I just cried because it was one of those moments where I'm like, I knew it. Like I knew I wasn't crazy. And I knew that there was something else. Like I'm getting full body chills even just saying that right now. Like I knew that it was confirming. And it was it's almost like I felt like this weight lifted off of me of like pretending that it was something else or that I've been pretending to not have this ability.
Yeah.
And it really opened up my own channel to explore like, what else do I have access to that I have been, keeping at arm's length or not letting in or misinterpreting. And I remember, after that moment, she actually had me do the same exercise for her where, she was teaching me and, explaining to me how to do this process. And so I went in and I did the same exercise for her. And I heard and saw her spirit guide as I was, doing this theta healing work on her as she had done on me. And I heard the name of her spirit guide and I shared the name with her. And of course, the whole time I'm like, you so got this wrong, Wendy. Like, what are you doing?
Just
like,
doubt.
you are so not as good as her.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't know what you're doing, but like, let's just try.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was done with the theta healing and I came back, because we go into a theta meditative state. And I came back and I remember she said to me, she's like, wow, she's like, that guide hasn't visited me in so long. Wow. She goes, that's really cool that you connected with her. And I was like, wait, and I literally said to her, I was like, wait, you know this one? Like she's come to you before? It was a female spirit guide. And she was like, oh yeah. She's like, she hasn't come to me in years. And she's like, I'm not surprised that she came through to you.
That's awesome.
And so it was that moment, it was that day, that experience that I was like, oh, I so now understand this world that I have kept at an arm's length, this ability. I don't really know what to call it, but this whole world that I have had access to for decades of my life, everything opened up to me at that point. And I was like, oh, I really know, like, this is really cool. Like, we're not the only ones here.
Yeah.
And it honestly, it felt so affirming to me. And it was, I'm somebody who preaches like, I don't need the external validation. And yet at the same time, it was exactly what I needed for me to just step in, own, and embody that part of me, because it is what makes me me.
It is. And I think when we deny it or we keep pushing it away or we're embarrassed by it, we're only living half of our life. We're only truly half fulfilled because we're denying a huge aspect of who we are.
Yeah. And I felt like that for most of my life.
Yeah.
And it really wasn't until I fully stepped in and embodied it and owned it, I really felt free.
Yeah.
It is such a freeing experience to own it, to see the gifts in it, and to know how special.
Mm-hmm.
And I will use that word, like, we are special,
Yeah.
but as you always say, we all have psychic abilities. We all have the potential to be special.
I agree.
Right? And it's a matter of whether you're willing to take that step. I kind of see it as like, I crossed the line.
Yeah.
Like, I was willing to step over the line and I would never go back.
Yeah, that's amazing. Okay, so I want to ask a couple personal questions, psychic still.
Yeah.
So one of the things that really helped me with grief was being able to communicate with Mike after he passed. So I know you have shared in a little bit on this, but in private, that you have been able to feel your mom and connect with your mom. I'd love to hear a little bit of that experience of like how it changed your path, or maybe how it helped you with your grief process by being able to tune in and be psychic and really recognize when your mom's here.
Yeah. So chills. I know she's here now too. Brings like emotion full front. Right after I watched my mom pass away. Yeah. I was with her when she took her last breath. And
do you know that spirits choose that, right?
Yes.
Okay. So that's a very significant thing for your mom to give you that honor of being there.
Yes.
Yeah.
And as you say that, right before she passed, and she was just asleep. I mean, she was in hospice at that point, and she hadn't spoken audibly in 24 hours. But I remember right before it happened, I remember feeling the nudge to say, it's okay, you can go. And I literally said to her, I said, Mom, I said, it's time to go. And I just said, I'm like, I've got Dad. I'm like, this isn't a life for you anymore. I'm like, I've got you. We will always be together.
Yeah.
And it was literally count to 5 or 10. And all of a sudden, if anyone who has watched someone pass, it was like instant. And I was like, oh my God, like, what is happening? And at first I was like, how could you do this to me?
Yeah.
Because it's not a pleasant experience to watch. No. And at first I was like, how could you do this? Like, I have to live with this, this image. And then it shifted, and I heard my mom say to me, I chose you. Mm-hmm. And like, I knew that she couldn't do it without me.
Yeah.
I'm going to say it this way. She didn't want to do it without me. And, and it's funny because even my dad will say like, oh yeah, she chose you. She knew I couldn't handle it. Yeah. And he's very right. And, and honestly, like right after she passed, she was still there for a little while, and, I got to spend some time with her, and I felt her in the room, and, I felt her, it must've been maybe like a month later. Cause I was like, where are you? Why don't I feel you? And I know that, again, in this moment that I'm about to say, I knew she was kind of in this in-between space. Like, I could feel that she was ready, but like hesitant to cross over. Right. And I remember I was sitting in my office, and I have a plum tree right outside of my office. And a blue jay came. I live in Los Angeles. We don't have blue jays.
Oh, okay.
Commonly.
I was like, that's not,
For you, probably not.
We have blue jays.
Right.
Yeah.
We don't really have blue jays in Southern California. And so, or at least in my neighborhood, I don't ever see them. Yeah. And all of a sudden, a blue jay came into the plum tree. And it started staring at me. And I remember looking up and looking at this blue jay, and it was my mom.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember her telling me, you're okay. I'm here. And so that was the first experience. The other is I was in Sedona. So I had intended to write a book, and my mom took a turn for the worse. So I kind of put the book on the back shelf, and about 8 months after she passed, I decided to pick it back up again. And I went to Sedona because I again had the nudge, had the call that I was supposed to be in Sedona to write this book. And I went to one of the portals, or, one of the, the energy vortexes in Sedona. And I remember feeling my mom coming in, and I finished a book in 5 days.
Wow.
And I know that my mom was helping me to write this book. And so I feel her coming in. I hear her voice. I think I mentioned to you the other day, I smelled her perfume in my house randomly. I've smelled her perfume before, but never in that one location in my house. And it was right outside of, my guest room, which is where she always stayed when she would come down and visit me and my children. And so it's really, I feel her in all the ways, and I always know that she's with me. I talk to her on a daily basis. I've begged her to come and to visit my father because he's X, Y, or Z. And lo and behold, 2 seconds later, my dad calls, "Oh my God, I felt your mom today." And so
beautiful.
Yeah, it's so comforting to know. And I feel her. And what I say is that it was time for her to pass, and she's actually in greater service to me where she is. And it was her time to go so that she could be here for me in a bigger way.
Yeah. And she totally is. And that's why I asked you, because I can just feel her around you. And I think a huge part of your understanding of energetics and how important they are and how important the spirits on the other side is that connection that you have with your mom, which allows you to bring it into your business in such a beautiful way.
Thank you.
So I absolutely love this. I love the fact that we've had this beautiful conversation and that you're like, no, I'm going to call myself. I'm going to acknowledge that I'm psychic, because I think it's going to, I know you work with women to help them unlock their intuition. And I think you could bring a whole another level of aspect into that. So thank you so much for being on here and for sharing and being my first interview in a really long time. This has been really beautiful. So thank you, Wendy. Do you want to share with the audience where they can connect with you?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Carrie.
You're so welcome.
You are such, truly, you're such a gift. I'm so grateful. Thank you for having me on your show. And for those of you guys, I would love to connect with each and every one of you. You guys can follow me on social media at Wendy Paige Sterling. You can also go and listen to my podcast, The Power in the Pause, which Carrie is an upcoming guest. So you can check that out. And then I've got a ton of really great information and freebies on my website, wendypagesterling.com.
Thank you. Thank you guys for tuning in. And we're going to have more of these beautiful experiences. And I'm hoping that these experiences help you to recognize that you as well are psychic. Be sure to like and subscribe. And I'll see you guys next time on The Psychic Within.